Airbnb or hotel? This is a debate as common as hard shell or soft shell luggage for travelers. Over the years, I feel like I've seen the shift go from hotels to Airbnbs and back. But if you're planning a trip and you want to keep your options open, or you're just trying to figure out if you should book an Airbnb or a hotel for your trip, this is the video for you. As a traveler myself, I have stayed at a lot of Airbnbs. I've also stayed at a lot of hotels, and honestly, I like them both. So in this video, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I try to keep in mind when I'm trying to decide if I want to stay at an Airbnb or hotel. You can use these factors that I'm talking about in this video to your own circumstances and your personality, and I'll also go through some pros and cons that I have found with each of them. One of the first things I factor in that isn't trip specific is my travel style, or more so the kind of traveler I am in the moment. Travel style can change and continue to grow as you travel more, and if you're new to travel, it might take a couple of trips under your belt to really figure out what kind of traveler you are. When I'm talking about travel style, I'm talking less about the kind of trips you like to take or where you like to go, and more so about your personality, the things you like to do, and who you are. Which, yes, this all can dictate where you choose to travel and how you like to travel, because who we are as people determines how we spend our money, how we spend our time, the things that we prioritize, etc. The next thing that I like to factor in is if I'm traveling solo or if I'm traveling in a group, and who I'm traveling with. In my opinion, Airbnbs can be great for group travel. So essentially, because you're usually in someone's house, condo, apartment, there's usually more than one bedroom, more than one bathroom, a lot more space, a lot more outlets, and usually a common space that everyone can chill and hang out in. And sometimes a lot of them even have balconies and outdoor spaces. So if I'm traveling with maybe 3 or more people, I usually will look at Airbnbs first over hotels. That way we can all have our own space. However, who you're traveling with is also a factor. When I'm solo traveling, it's always a roll of the dice, because most of the time, whether I choose an Airbnb or a hotel usually depends on 2 major factors: the price and the purpose of my trip. So the purpose of my trip and the travel goals for that particular trip are huge driving factors as to the type of accommodation that I might choose. Is this a spa trip? Is this a girls trip? Is this a work trip? So for example, this is an adorable treehouse that I stayed at and I found on Airbnb. And I stayed here because it was an hour and a half away from where I lived, and I wanted a unique experience and a relaxing place to stay without having to leave my state. I chose this hotel when I was doing a solo trip to Mexico City because it was super cute and it was way cheaper than a lot of other places that I had looked at. It was also in the neighborhood and the area that I wanted to stay in. And as you can see, it was quite small, but because it was just me, it was the perfect size for me, and it was very cozy. I also knew that I was going to be exploring pretty much morning to night, and I just needed a safe, clean, cozy place to lay my head down at night. And this had all the basic amenities that I needed for my trip without breaking the bank. This was also my first time in Mexico City, so I knew I was probably going to stay at a hotel because I wanted that extra layer of security, and I wanted to stay somewhere that had a staff. However, this Airbnb was also a solo trip, but this was in Sevilla in Spain. I loved this place, and I chose it because it had a private balcony, cozy, homey vibes, and it was a short walk from a lot of the attractions that I knew I was going to go visit. On this particular trip, I knew that I needed to get a lot of work done, so I wanted a place that was a little bit more private, somewhere where I wouldn't get too distracted because I really needed to get some of this work done. And also I wanted a place where I could probably cook and heat up a couple of meals if I was just way too busy to go out and get some food. And this, the TWA Hotel, this was on my mom and I's bucket list for so long, and so we went there solely to enjoy this iconic hotel and all of the amenities that they had to offer. So as you can see, each one of these hotels and Airbnbs were at different price points, and they were all uniquely distinct from each other because the purpose of each one of those trips were different. So maybe think through the purpose of your trip and why you're traveling, what your travel goals are, and use that, allow that to guide you into which accommodation you might choose. The length of the trip is also something I consider when I'm choosing an Airbnb or a hotel. If you have the privilege of traveling for an extended period of time, maybe you're on a work leave or sabbatical, or maybe you work remotely and you have the chance to work off-site for a little while, all of these things will help decide which option is going to be better for you. And also, a lot of Airbnbs have different rates if you're staying longer. All that being said, you can stay in a location for a month or longer at a hotel. Some hotels do offer extended stay amenities and prices. So I feel like Basically what I'm trying to say is that it's not one size fits all. Price also plays a major role in whether I pick an Airbnb or a hotel for my trip. So usually in a lot of cases when I'm solo traveling, I will start my search with a hotel and then I will expand it to Airbnbs and compare prices and amenities. Sometimes the price does the work for me in picking where I'm gonna stay. So for example, in this video, I talked about how I went to Toronto for a couple of days last year. Now, the purpose of my trip was very clear and I wasn't going to be there for that long. So I had every intention of booking the hotel, and I also knew which area of town would be best for me on that trip. But when I started looking at hotels, they were way higher than I was anticipating. So I had to pivot and I hopped on Airbnb and I found a nice private room. It was affordable. It was exactly what I was looking for. And it was in the neighborhood and the area that I wanted. And so I booked it and I went with it. So that happened to work out for me for that particular case. Now I do want to note that if I'm choosing an Airbnb over a hotel, most of the time I'm doing this in Europe over the United States, because I have found that the fees and rates in Europe are significantly cheaper than they are in the US. Just to give you a little bit of a price comparison, it's kind of hard to do with inflation, and I haven't stayed at that many Airbnbs recently, but let me try to give you an example and paint a picture for you of what I'm talking about. I stayed at a room in a house on a solo trip to Porto, and this is how much it cost me a night. This is how much it cost me for a night when I was staying in Granada for a solo trip. While I do think it's important to compare prices of Airbnbs and hotels in the areas that you are considering, price also plays a role when you are a part of a loyalty or incentive program. So for example, I am a Marriott girl myself. I love a good Marriott Bonvoy, and I will sometimes choose a Marriott over a cheaper Airbnb or a cheaper hotel because I want to maintain my status or I want to get more points. Take all of that into account as well when you're planning. And just a side note, there are some hotels that will also list on Airbnb. So if you happen to see a hotel listing on an Airbnb, go to the hotel's actual website and see what their prices are, because most of the time if they're cross-posting on Airbnb, their prices on their actual website are going to be cheaper. The last thing that helps me determine which one I choose is my familiarity with that destination. So I am someone who likes to explore new cities, new destinations, but I'm also someone who likes to repeat destinations because I like to go back and get to know them even deeper. If you're not new to my channel, then you know that I have a deep love for Spain. I love talking about Spain. I love sharing about Spain on this channel. This is kind of an example as well. There are certain cities within Spain like Barcelona or Madrid where I feel more familiar and comfortable with them, so I will most likely choose an Airbnb over a hotel because I'm fairly familiar with the common crimes. I can speak the language to an okay degree, and choosing an Airbnb thus far on several trips to Spain, I have not had a problem. Now let's talk about some pros and cons for each. A big pro with hotels is that they're reputable, reliable, and consistent. Most of the time with hotels, we know what we're getting. Pretty good customer service that's also held to that standard as well. With hotels being so consistent and reliable, building status with their incentive programs is a huge pro, and that has come in so handy at times, especially with things like early check-in, late checkout, and free breakfast. Also, building upon this reliability of hotels, a lot of them usually have 24-hour services and amenities. For example, 24/7 front desk and or concierge service, gym, business amenities. Speaking of amenities, depending on the hotel, some of the amenities can be really good, like room service, housekeeping, spa, pool, gym, bar, the list goes on. And when you're traveling a lot, especially for business, that on-site dining can be really helpful. Some hotels can be safer. This is debatable because obviously it's going to depend on location, neighborhood, area, destination, all of those things. But a lot of people feel safer in a hotel because of the 24/7 front desk. A lot of hotels and buildings usually have security. You have a lot of people coming in and out. And this is why I also say that if you're a new solo traveler, a hotel is a good option for you. Discounts. A lot of surrounding attractions and restaurants will offer discounts to guests staying at a particular hotel. I've definitely used some of these discounts at restaurants, bars, and even at shows like theater shows and things like that. Another big pro for hotels, especially if it's a major chain or a a popular hotel in an area is that they're usually really good for hotel pickups and drop-offs when you are doing a tour. So some cons of staying at a hotel, obviously these are going to be circumstantial. This is a little bit more of a generalization, but one con from hotels is that there's usually no kitchen facilities. So unless you're staying in a suite-like hotel, there might be a mini fridge, but that's about it. Now this might not be an issue for you, of course, depending on some of the factors that I mentioned earlier in this video, but if it is, you have a lot of food allergies, whatever the case may be, you might want to think about this when you're booking a hotel. Now we all know that hotels are sometimes not ideal for big group travel. Is it doable? Yes, but it is not always ideal, especially in a situation where you haven't seen that particular group of people in a while and you really want to catch up. Of course, everyone can congregate in one person's room or something like that. Also, the outlets. There are not a lot of outlets in hotels. That's why I always talk about the little mini surge protectors. I always travel with one of those because they come in really handy. Sometimes hotels can have higher prices. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that Airbnbs are usually more expensive than hotels, and this can be true because it depends on the type of Airbnb that you're staying. Now, because I solo travel a lot and I'm also not afraid of staying in a room rather than an entire apartment or entire place, so depending on the case, sometimes a hotel can be more expensive, especially if it's a room. Again, use your own discernment and judgment when you're traveling. So now let's talk about some pros and cons with Airbnb. Some pros. As someone who likes to take advantage of unique stays and unique experiences, I have to say that Airbnb is the king of unique stays. It is one of my favorite things about Airbnb. I've stayed at a tree house, a yurt. You can even see my tiny home stay in this video right here. I've mentioned it so much in this video. They are good for group travel. Airbnbs can be really great for things like bachelorette parties, family reunions, and girls trips. Airbnbs can be cost effective. So again, depending on your destination, your travel experience, your style, your comfortability, like I mentioned before, they can be cost effective, especially if you're staying in a room rather than an entire apartment. So while hotels do have great amenities, Airbnbs can also have great amenities as well, depending on what you're looking for your trip. So things like laundry, kitchen. Like I mentioned in this video, Airbnb is a great choice if you're staying in one location for a month or longer. It's a great option. So Airbnb is certainly not what it used to be in the past. I've been staying at Airbnbs for a long time, and some of my greatest travel memories have been sharing a meal or hanging out with a host, kind of having that inside window into what it's like to have a local experience somewhere. And while you don't really get that so much anymore like you used to, you can still have a local flair in some Airbnbs depending on where you stay. Okay, so some cons for Airbnb. If you tend to be a brand loyalist like me, then you love a good loyalty program. Airbnb doesn't have a loyalty program. If they did, I would probably join it. Of course, Airbnb doesn't allow you to have status or, early check-in, late checkout, and things like that. Now, sometimes you can organize that with hosts. I have done that many times where I've been able to come in early or I've been able to leave late depending on if they have another guest before or after me, but it just sucks that they don't have a loyalty program. Fees and rules. So this is one of the biggest gripes that people have with Airbnb, and I totally get it. This is also one of the reasons why I kind of stopped staying at Airbnbs for a while, or I don't stay in them as often as I used to because of the fees and the rules. Some hosts will sometimes have some really ridiculous rules. Take the trash out, strip the beds, load the dishwasher. Some of them are valid, but some of them are really just out of pocket. I could go on and on about this, clearly. As I've mentioned before in this video, I find that the fees and the house rules are not as astronomical in Europe as they are in the US. Depending on the city, Airbnb as a whole might have some blurred lines and issues with legalities in certain cities. For example, if you haven't heard, Barcelona is looking to eliminate all vacation rentals in the city by the year 2028, something they're doing to help with the housing crisis, and I don't blame them. While they aren't necessarily illegal in some cities, I know like Atlanta and New York, there are a lot of blurred lines and a few hoops that hosts and people who own Airbnbs need to go through. So that is something to take into consideration. If you do want to learn a little bit more about Airbnbs, how to book your first Airbnb, or maybe some common mistakes that you don't want to fall into, then definitely check out either one of these videos here, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.